Thanks for tuning in to Positioning Your Passion podcast. I'm your host, Nah, and I'm here with a dope creative entrepreneur and the homie, Ciera McKissick.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for saying yes. So jumping right in, you have a brand that's called AMFM. Can you let folks know like what that brand is and what does AMFM stand for?
Yeah, AMFM is an arts platform that supports emerging artists across various different disciplines. So art, music, and fashion predominantly. But I work with interdisciplinary artists across all different kinds of facets. So dancers, poets, live musicians, writers, all kinds of stuff. If you have a creative passion and you're trying to get it out there, essentially I'll work with you. And it's something I've been doing since college back in 2009. Started off as a magazine, shifted to events, and yeah, we're just connector of people essentially. And AMFM stands for Arts, Music, Fashion Magazine initially, but now it's kind of just like an ethos, I think, really.
Nice. I feel like that's how I met you as like a photographer.
Yeah,
like shooting events.
Yeah, taking a lot of pictures, doing a lot of concerts. Yeah, those were the days for sure. In the pit, during like festivals and stuff. So
exactly. Yeah. What brought you to Chicago? Because you're from
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
Yeah, originally from Milwaukee. I actually just got back this morning from a trip back home, but I was really looking for the next step in my work and really trying to do this whole art thing and do more events. I had moved back home after a stint in Sacramento for like 2.5 years and started dabbling in doing events there, resurfaced AMFM as the magazine, and was really thinking about, I want to go to New York or I want to go to LA, and thought Chicago would be a nice kind of pit stop before I figured out what my next move was. And I was only supposed to stay here for a year, right. And it's been almost 10, which is wild. So yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like what it was like growing up in Milwaukee and how are you like able to stay connected to the scene there as well as here?
Yeah, I really feel like it's very interesting too, because I feel like Chicago outside of my hometown is the place I've been the longest across the span, and it feels more like my home than my actual hometown. And going to Milwaukee now as an adult, I've really been rediscovering it in a completely different way and like seeing it through new eyes. But I enjoyed growing up there. I went to like a creative arts elementary school. Like my middle school was for gifted and talented students and stuff like that. So I had academic rigor. I did sports in high school, like cross country and soccer. And I wasn't really into like art and like music in the same vein, but I was always surrounded by the culture and scene within the city. Like I remember growing up and going to gallery nights with my dad. Those happen every like first or second Friday in the city, and he would always take me to them. And it's not like the type of art that I'm into now. Like it's Milwaukee, it's Wisconsin, so it's very like kitschy kind of crafty art and stuff like that. But I think going to those and being exposed to those different kinds of cultures and whatnot and different people from different walks of life really heavily influenced my inquisitiveness and wanting to kind of seek out those types of environments of creatives and community that I wanted to see myself in. And the one place that I can really attest to that made me really want to do events and work in this type of work or do this field was this space called Uprock.
Okay.
And it was like really embedded in hip hop culture, skateboard culture, street art, graffiti and stuff like that. And they used to do block parties. And I remember being like really young, like 12 or like 13, just going off on my own and hanging out there with my friends and stuff like that. And just seeing all the people like really dapping it up with each other, like making art, making music and like going to shows and stuff. And I was like, I want to do something, or I want to create a space like this one day. And when I was younger, I used to write a lot. I had a notebook everywhere I went. I would make my own magazines, and like I had writers at school. Like it's really wild. My dad kept one of the first magazines that I made, and I have like bylines from different people at school that I had writing for me about like different articles, interviewing different students and stuff about their likes in pop culture and like fashion and stuff like that. So at a very young age, I would say, looking back at it now, I was definitely doing similar things as to now. And it's interesting how it's all manifested over time as well. And I like to stay connected mainly through like going home and like checking out what's happening in the city, looking at like the local newspaper, like the Shepherd Express, which is similar to like our Reader here, like the Red Eye. and seeing what's going on. 88.9 is one of my favorite radio stations. They do like music from local artists, so you can hear what's in tune, like who's playing what. I'm always checking in with people, trying to make sure like, oh, Classic has a show this week, and I'm definitely going to go check that out, and just really trying to stay in pulse with like kind of how the scene is coming up there, because it's our sister city. And before, when I had a space, I was always trying to fold some of those artists into some of the things I was doing in Chicago. But oftentimes too, I feel so removed from what's happening there in some ways, because I've been so embedded and so ingrained in Chicago that I'm like, oh, I need to tap in a bit more, like who are the new people who are coming up, based upon like when I left, and like really trying to tap in a bit more, especially as I go home. So.
I feel like I've seen some of those events from you, like something at Virgin where you had like some artists from Milwaukee perform with some Chicago artists.
Yeah, that was like a collective of people. It was really cool. And I think I'm really interested in these ideas of like artist exchanges and really pairing them with each other, so that you're coming for a Chicago artist and you get to discover something new from someone you don't know. And then oftentimes some of those people end up working together, or vice versa. They'll go to Chicago, or Chicago artists will go to Milwaukee and do something, and they have a connection in a community already. So I'm really, really interested in kind of making those connections between people.
But yeah, growing up in Milwaukee and just having so much exposure through your dad, and then being able to like keep or see that connection to like the things that you were doing very early on, and then how you've been able to like establish a career. I think that's super interesting. One thing that I wanted to ask you is like being a transplant that has put in so much work, and I'm sure it has not been easy, because Chicago is very cliquey and very proud. How have you been able to infiltrate, sustain, and build those relationships, not being from Chicago?
Yeah, I think there's a certain like authenticity that I like came to it with. When I first moved here, I was really just trying to get the lay of the land. I didn't do anything for the whole first year that I was here. I was just going to events, trying to do what I would do if I moved to any city, or I like to treat cities like I'm visiting them also. So like, how can I find a cafe to go to and find the poster wall where I can find the shows to go to? I'm looking on social media to like tap into open mics and things like that. So really the first year was spent just going to places, introducing myself, and like having conversations about people's work, and like not even trying to like, oh, I want to do something with you first and foremost, really just trying to get to know people and get to know the city and the scene and whatnot. So yeah, when I first moved here, I was really just working at a middle school, teaching writing and after school programs and whatnot, and not really doing anything art related. I was just going to stuff. And I think the first person who put me on, I went to a show. What was the name of the group? I went to a show and Pugs Adams was opening for the show. Okay. And I remember I really liked his haircut, and I thought that his music was super dope. So I went up to him after the show, and I was like, hey, man, you were really, really great. And I love your haircut. And I'm like, I just moved here about a year ago, and I have this thing called AMFM. I would love to like chat with you, because at the time I was still doing written features and whatnot as well too. And he was like, oh, you should come by. I do this radio program. I would love to like show you the studio and stuff like that. And I thought that I was just going to check out the studio and like talk to him and stuff like that. But he was like, no, you're going to be on the show. And I was like, okay. Bet. So that was like my first interview in Chicago with Pugs for CTA Radio and Mxxd, Kevin. And I talked about, all the work that I had done previously, because AMFM was an independent study project from college that I wrote articles for, and it evolved into doing like small scale events and exhibitions in Milwaukee, and I was really looking to try to do that here on a larger scale. So being able to have that and interview and like meeting all the people that I did, then I started to really get inspired. Like Chicago, and the reason I've been here for almost a decade now is really the arts community sucked me in and like kind of held me. And I felt like him opening up the opportunity, it felt like almost too easy.
Like, a little cosign.
Definitely. And I feel like from that moment on, I was able to really just come to people as myself and like meet them where they're at and have great conversations and be able to do the work that I'm doing currently. And I think that you don't want to like come to a place and be like, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. I was really interested in collaboration. One of the first events that I did was with Amani, who was doing that project 50 Shots, where she was taking photos of black men around Chicago to really dispel the myths that they are, you know, thugs and like in jail. So she had them in front of these backdrops of mugshots. So they were like fake mugshots from black men in her life. And I really thought that it was such a powerful exhibition, and I really wanted to showcase it in the way that I wanted to, in a space that I was working with at the time called HQ. And that was kind of like the seed of like the jazz series and like combining music and art together that I was really cultivating with that. So we had music performances, we had the art up at the space in Wicker Park, and people came, and it was just a really beautiful experience. And then I did a fashion show with Pugs, like circling back and wanting to work with him in some regard, because I loved the work that he was doing at Iridium. And I was really interested in working and getting to know more artists and really combining these different types of elements into one thing. I wanted to have fashion happening, art happening, music performances, and DJs. And I just got in a residency at the Chicago Art Department. And it was one of the first kind of like opportunities that I had to work with a blank space. They had like 3 galleries at the time. In this huge space, I had a desk that I was able to work with, a key 24-hour access, and I originally went to the Chicago Art Department to see if I could do that event there. It was supposed to be a fashion show where I was making masks, because I was really into plaster at the time, and I was making masks on different people. So I wanted to make masks on models and give it to 20 different artists to completely deck out on their own and then pair them with Iridium clothing. And it was called Masquerade. So I wanted to host the event at the art department, and was telling Mike, who was the director at the time, about my work. And he was like, oh, it sounds like you could use a residency or like a space to be able to kind of like actualize your ideas and things like that. So they offered me a residency instead of offering me just the space for the event. So that was kind of my really first toe dip into being able to have access to space, create space freely, and really bring my ideas to fruition. And that was the first real show that I put on in that space. And I collaborated with Iridium and Splash Paradise, which was Earn Money and a couple other people, like Roy French's like group at the time. They were doing these pop-ups. You bring together these various different networks, you can really do something more impactful instead of everyone kind of just trying to do their own thing. So Splash Paradise kind of curated some of the music performances that were happening in this space. So Roy French performed AJ Peace, and we had DJ Earn Money. It was my first time working with DJ Scully, which is wild, like looking back at it now. And we had auditions for the models. I literally made the masks with my hands on their faces and gave it to 20 different artists that I connected with over time. And we transformed the 2 spaces and had a fashion show where the artists were wearing the masks, and then all the other stuff was going on at the same time. And like 250 people came, and I wasn't expecting that. At the time I was like, wow, like, and from then on I was just really hooked with the bug, and I never looked back after that event. I just kind of was really hungry and like wanted to collaborate and work more. We did a couple of those series together, and really like the network just started to continue to grow, so much so that like being in the Chicago Art Department space like really gave me the vision to be able to actualize my dreams and like my visions and events and like curatorial projects coming to life, that I wanted to do the same thing for others. And seeing how the model operated, like, you have a residency here, you're able to do this, and there were other resident artists like painters and like woodworkers and like all kinds of things in this one big building that housed them all. I wanted to try to do something on a micro level. Really wanted my own space, so I ended up leaving the Chicago Art Department to open up AMFM essentially, and like using the inspiration from that to create.
Where was the first location?
The first location of AMFM? It was in Pilsen. I had lived in Pilsen, like right above Kumales, like for a number of years at that point, and really wanted to do something in the Pilsen area because so many of the pop-ups I was doing was in that area. And it was on 21st and Levitt between Hoyne, not too far from where Pilsen Outpost was. Amazing taco man across the
2151 was the first spot?
2151.
Yeah, you know, that's like why I moved to Pilsen. Like that was like a one of the things was like, oh, we're going to be close to AMFM.
That's funny.
I could skate there.
Yeah, what's funny too is like I remember coming across like a Craigslist ad, and in the description for someone's thing it said close to AMFM, and I was like, wow, that's pretty wild. We did a lot with that 900 square foot space, definitely. Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
a lot.
A lot. Probably too much.
But it set a trajectory, though. And I think
Yeah.
it's like a moment in really Chicago history, especially art and music scene. And it's like, if you know, you know. But a lot of folks got their first starts in that space. Do you ever reflect on that? Just like how important AMFM was and just all the things that y'all did in that short amount of time in that small space?
Yeah, it really was such a slice in time. I think about it often a lot, actually, and thinking about how I was kind of just winging it a lot of the time. Like, I didn't expect it to grow or be as big as it was. I think I was doing this kind of like fake it till you make it mentality, and I had been doing all these pop-ups around the city and really wanted my own space. And once I finally got one, it was just me still like alone working within the space, and doing the first event and the impact of how many people had came out just to show love for that. It was one of the coldest nights of the year. It was like, I think it was January 6th or something like that. That was when we opened, and there was a line out the door, and we were definitely at fire code, like inside.
Consistent theme at AMFM.
Yeah, people were like, I'm going to leave the event so that other people can come and experience this, like to get in for that. So it was just honestly like a little mini music festival within that 900 square foot space. It was built with love. Like, I've had friends who are muralists, like do murals on the walls. I had a small shop within the space where local makers or like designers who were trying to get their t-shirt designs or like make wearable bags and stuff like that for sale in the shop. We had art on display and things like that. Food, like Via Rosa was in the kitchen cooking, Via Rosa, like, and now and the food was so good. Also, I saw her and I was like, "Do you still cook?" Like, yeah, she does. Right. But yeah, really just thinking about so many people who were like, I had my first show here, like it was my first opportunity to exhibit my work, or even like outside of the music things, like the other kinds of scales of the types of events that we were doing. We had like Soul Sundays where we were doing yoga and tarot reading and like meditation within the space once a month. We also hosted women's health, like the women's clinic up north hosted an entire retreat over the weekend there, and they were able to like utilize the space. We even hosted a summer camp for CPS, and teachers came and turned AMFM into a classroom, and then we had a show of the kids' art and stuff like that. So really just thinking about the different types of communities we touched upon in that space, and then having a core group of resident artists who I wanted to offer them mentorship and space to work on their practice and also grow. I wanted them to have the opportunity to work in that space and grow and have mentorship and bring their ideas to fruition in the same way. Erin Leanne Mitchell is one of the first artists that I was working with within that space, and she's like completely gone off on a different trajectory, blown up and like doing Langston amazing work. Langston, like
truly was a moment in time. I want to ask you, when we talk about DIY, what does that mean for you, and why do you think that that is so important? You did mention earlier how there isn't necessarily anything happening in that vein, like right now, like presently. Like, what are your thoughts on the DIY community, and why is that important?
So DIY essentially is like do-it-yourself kind of mentality, being an artist-run space where you're doing things like basically off your own back and stuff like that, putting together the space, literally bringing the funding to the space, creating the model, and doing the work on your own without any type of support. And like I said, I was doing that by myself, and it got to the point where it got bigger than myself and I needed to bring on a team. So I did a search, and I got such a great group of people, like honestly, like owe so much to them over time, and we really became like a close, tight-knit family during that time as well. But I think that a lot of these spaces don't necessarily have the same longevity as higher art institutions or spaces that have backing, because you're literally working with a shoestring budget and oftentimes doing things under the table. You don't have the infrastructure to support yourself in the same way. And what I was really interested in during that time was how to straddle the line of being an established business space, but also working within the DIY community. Like, person who was on my team works for larger scale like concert venues and works managing artists like dip low and like hire name people. So he was able to bring that kind of mentality and mindset to us and how we booked people.
Yeah.
What does an offer letter look like? How do you liaise between venues and like artist managers and stuff like that? So it was the skill sets that I didn't necessarily have. I can curate, I can bring the vision, but making sure I had people on my team who had completely different skill sets to bring to the table. DIY spaces are super, super important. So it's nice to see people coming out of college and like trying to carry on the ethos of that, because those are the spaces where you can be the most free and experimental as possible. You don't have the red tape of the institution or, you know, sales driving the guise of like what your work should be. You're really truly able to come in and just work with a blank canvas and like do something radical and do something that can push you to explore, to experiment, to really incubate. And I think that's important for artists to be able to have the space and freedom to do that. So I'm always like pushing for more spaces for experimentation, honestly. And you can do that in a DIY space versus if you're working with a gallery, an established gallery or like a higher institution, you can't always do that. You have to come correct in a certain different way.
Yeah. Speaking of higher institutions and working within gallery spaces, you, like you said, like you straddle the line kind of very well, but you're also an artist, you know, of your own. What has that experience been like being a woman of color, navigating those spaces where you are adding or convincing folks of the value of certain art, but then also being the curator in those kind of spaces where you've been invited in?
Yeah, I feel like I'm really interested in working within those spaces too, because the more that I do that, the more that I can learn and apply it to the work that I want to do as well. I've always been, like, after the space closed, I was really interested and very adamant about learning about sustainability and learning about things from the inside. So I was very strategic in wanting to work in an institutional space so that I can bring it to AMFM. But you do, like I said, you come with, you're having to fulfill the needs and the wants of the institution first, as opposed to your own ideas and your own vision. So sometimes I'll come with ideas and bring them to the table, and I'll have to shift or tweak them so that they fit within the realm of like what the role is supposed to be doing. If I'm working with an exhibition and trying to tell the story of that within the space that I currently work at, then I have to think about how is the community going to engage with this? How can I break this down for educational components? There's so much more to it. And like, it's nice to have a budget to work with also, but I'm really interested in how can I marry kind of my own passions and my community and network within those spaces and bring artists that I've worked with into those places also, alongside some of the spaces that they're working with. It's really about a melding of like different cultures also, because within those different kinds of higher art institutions, you're working with a different caliber of artists, you're working with different diverse backgrounds, artists of different ages, and oftentimes it does come with a lot of red tape. I think you have to get permission, versus if I could just do something like that within my own gallery space versus having to get permission and get approval and, you know, make a proposal for what I want to do. But it's taught me a lot about how to come to the table prepared also. I think that I think about curating differently, and I think about exhibition making, and also how to approach partnerships also at a different capacity now, having worked in these different types of spaces too. I think that my curatorial practice has definitely grown to be more intensive and research driven also. Before, in the past, I would have like visions for how work would complement one another or the specific artists that I want to work with, but ultimately, like, what is the story that I want to tell? Like, how am I diving deeper into an artist practice? Where do their ideas or themes come from historically and within text also? What types of art movements are they pulling from? What are they thinking about? And all of those things come into the exhibition in a completely different way, I think. So I think one of my last shows that I did, called Relic, it took me 2 years to like actualize it, because I was doing a lot of reading of books, really trying to dive deeper into what does it mean to have like a cultural, like African Black aesthetic artifact, like what does that mean? What are the texts that I need to read in order to actualize these ideas and like concepts that I'm like thinking and talking about, and wanting to put forth the stories from the artists in that way, and putting together the proposal, putting together a budget, and being paid to be able to actually bring the exhibition to life versus having to charge for entry for something, or being able to pay artists to show work as opposed to just putting work on a wall. It really, really was a different level. And I wouldn't have learned that if I wouldn't have worked within those types of spaces, I think.
Yeah. Does your gender or ethnicity show up in these spaces?
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I definitely think that it does. I feel like, especially working within a space where I am, you know, a younger Black woman, and I'm thinking a lot about the ideas that I have and having to almost be better, like come fully prepared and like fully come correct. Also, there's like a certain level of preparedness that you have to prepare yourself for. Sometimes I don't feel like I can be my full, like completely full self in those spaces oftentimes. Not to say that the place that I work isn't diverse, not to say that I'm not valued in that same sense, but I do think that inherently, like, you feel like you have to do more oftentimes too. Yeah. I think it's definitely more noticeable within those spaces. I'm working with a lot more white artists also within those spaces versus being able to work with so many different types of different people from different backgrounds. Yeah.
What was it like losing AMFM?
Yeah. I don't know. I think
are you still
I think when it happened, I was really upset and I was really hurt. I think because of the way that it went down, like it wasn't because I was mismanaging money or wasn't successful in what I was trying to do. I think that it was really like unfortunate, like underlying like racism, and like, you know, like people didn't like that I had all these people outside. People would throw up gang signs at like people who were outside of AMFM. Like people would say that I was doing stuff and not cleaning up after myself, when after every show, like I would do that very thing, like clean up and like check. At the end, it felt like we were walking on eggshells, and there were a select few neighbors who like definitely weren't rocking with us, and they were the ones who kept complaining to the landlords. And sometimes they would complain that something happened and we weren't even there and we weren't even doing a show that day. So it got to the point where I didn't even want to be there at that point, and it was too much. Like, honestly, I wanted to figure out a way to, how can I like fix these tensions? In the beginning, I would go door to door and like invite people to shows and stuff like that. And there were some neighbors who were like, yeah, like we really, really appreciate what you're doing. They would come to stuff. And then there was just some people who I didn't know who they were. That was the thing. So ultimately, like the landlord had to do what he had to do. Like, I understand that. But I was completely devastated because I had quit my job and was doing it full time for like a year at that point, and it was going smoothly other than that. So I was so adamant after I closed, like, I need to find a space right away. Like, I need to continue this. But I'm really glad that I took the time to pause, because in retrospect, I've thought a lot about what it means to go within a neighborhood, one, in a city that I'm not from, two, in a community that I'm not directly like a part of. It was a very residential neighborhood. Like, is that the type of space where those things should be happening also? How would I enter a space again if I had to do it all over again? Instead of going door to door and telling people or asking people to come to my events, I would go door to door and ask people, what are the types of events or programs or things would you like to see within your community, within this space, and try to fold more of that into it. I think with a mature mind now, and also having worked within institutions that do community readiness assessments and build programs and talk to community partners, I have a completely like different way of like thinking about space making now. Yeah.
So blessing in disguise.
Yeah, honestly. And now when I do get another space, which I definitely do want.
When?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I think I have one more leg of the lessons and the journeys to do.
Coming.
Yeah, because like I work at the Hyde Park Art Center, and it's been like I'm super happy with my job. I get to do programming and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it's still a community art space. Even though it's an institution, it actually started as an artist-run space, and it's been around for 84 years, which is wild. It's like they've been able to sustain that, and now they're doing so much work. I've learned so much. I've never worked in like a commercial like art gallery or like higher art space, and I think ultimately I want to work in a space like that so that I can see what it's like and then really try to fuse together all of the things that I'm trying to do. Because right now I can do all the art shows that I want to do. I can work with all the artists that I want to work with, but I'm really interested in how can I continue to create capital for these artists also. Like, you're making work, I want to be able to sell your work also. If artists and people within the community are coming to the show and not necessarily buying work, then I need to connect with collectors and people with capital who can offer you more opportunities and heighten the platform also. So that's really one of my main focuses right now, is just expanding the network. I'm really interested in traveling to more places to like think about exchanges where I can bring artists here and send artists also outside of the city to work with other people and like continue to grow the net. And then I'll open a space. I think I want like a whole building. I want like an institution that solely focuses on the work of like emerging artists and like gets them to the next level. I want to be that bridge to like a higher art institution. Like, they have their show here and I'm connecting you with this museum so that you can get your work acquired or something like that. So yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, that's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's looking to start out as an art curator or even have their own gallery space?
Yeah. I think relationship building is so, so important. That's ultimately all of the work that I've been able to do here in Chicago and just in general has been through relationship building and conversations and really getting to know artists. I like to say that like all of the artists that I've worked with, we have some mutual respect and like level of friendship also, because I'm invested in you also. I'm checking in with you. I want to continue to do studio visits to see how your practice has evolved over the years also. So I'm very tapped into that, and I think that you're responsible for like telling the stories and like holding this like art is very vulnerable, like music is very vulnerable, and like you have to really be invested in the person and invested in the practice in order to amplify the message. So don't just do it because it looks cool or the art is hot at the moment or you want to work with that artist. Like, really truly do it because you believe in them and you want them to get to the next level, and like be responsible for telling their stories. Like, even doing Expo this year was like such a
this
feat.
Is like your second or third year?
It was my first year.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
my first year doing Mxxd, and like coming from AMFM, being a DIY space and being able to be in that huge like pavilion with these galleries from all over the world.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I wanted to do Expo ever since I moved to Chicago, and being able to be there was really surreal. But so many of the people who came to my booth said I told them more about the art and the artist than any of the other booths that they had gone to, because people will just sit behind their computer and not talk to you because they don't think that you're going to buy the art or whatever. But like, ultimately my job is to tell you the story of the art and to tell you the story of the artist. So that's the most important thing, I think. Relationship building and like really truly being invested in growth, I think. Yeah.
Nice. What's next for AMFM?
What's next? Well, I'm trying to do some fun stuff. Like, I'm trying to experiment. Like, I'm trying to do like a live talk show. I'm really interested in continuing to have conversations with people. I'm thinking about bringing back this dinner series that I had called Reservations, where I was cooking meals and like doing performances in between. But really, I have like a new project space that I'm really trying to launch and like see what that looks like, to focus on my own curatorial practice and let myself experiment a bit more and use that space as an incubator to figure out the next phase of what AMFM would look like. Right now, it's been a lot of connecting with different businesses and working with artists to get them opportunities to show work and get paid at the same time. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing how it evolves, I think, too, and like really trying to juggle these two different projects that I have and figure out what the next leg is of the work. Yeah. allowing myself to dream again. I think I'm really interested in getting back in the pot and get back in the kitchen.
Let's go. Back in the kitchen cooking.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions before we wrap up. Being a person who has pretty much like garnered your success by being in community, building relationships, how do you balance like your self-care versus like being everywhere?
Oh my God. I think I'm learning right now.
Same.
Yeah, honestly, it's been a real struggle, honestly. Like, I feel like because I'm so invigorated with the work and it doesn't always feel like work, I am constantly in motion or like trying to go to stuff, trying to do stuff. And that's been really hard for me. I need to learn how to say no. I've been trying to practice that more. I've been trying to schedule time and space for myself to just be, I think, and figure out what self-care and quiet looks like for myself. Honestly, this summer has been a whirlwind, and it's been one of the busiest summers of my life because I'm juggling my day job and I'm also juggling and trying to sustain my own platform and artistic practice also. And being tired from doing all of that, also having a partner and like also trying to see my family and things like that has been really hard. And it's been really getting to me so much so that like I need now and then to like get out in nature and like try to unplug like completely. So I've really been trying to figure out how to slow down and what that looks like for me personally. Because I love going to stuff, honestly. Like, that's how I built my practice and, like, my work here. So what does it look like to be at home more? Like, I have a garden. I love being in my garden, and I love biking, and I love running. And those, I feel like, are meditative moments for me to just do something for myself. Those are, like, some of the only times that I'm ever alone also. And being able to just get lost in my thoughts. Because when you're constantly in production mode, you don't allow yourself the time to dream. Truly, like, just be still, I think. So that's when a lot of the ideas happen, I think. I oftentimes tell artists this because so many times the first question that people will ask you is like, oh, what are you working on? What you got next? And you know, sometimes I just want to be like, you know,
I'm just living.
Yeah, I'm just living. Like, I think that the living and the incubation period is just as important as the production period too.
Exactly.
And then when you're ready to like release something, it'll be 2 times better because you allowed yourself that time and space. So I think that's where I've been at. I've been incubating. I've been trying to cook and trying to live. And I think the pot will be sweeter once I'm ready to really do the next thing. Yeah.
Facts. Yeah. So last question for your brand, and I have a shirt on now.
Yes.
There is pink is at the forefront in cassettes. Can you share like what that means? Why is that a center point, the pink in the cassettes?
Yeah, I came up with the branding and the logo. It initially was a black and white cassette tape. So when I designed it back in college, I was very interested in the culture of like the radio and like hip hop culture and the mixtape. So that really was why I was like mixing together all of these different types of art, musicians, and like really culminating them all into that package. And I loved making mixtapes and things like that growing up too. So with the black tape, we shipped it over once we got the AMFM gallery space, and I was working with an installation artist, Jane George, and we were going to do a tape wall that the iconic like pink tape wall that was the backdrop for this space. She ended up getting this spray paint, and it was specifically Cadillac pink. Yeah, that's the name of like the spray paint. And we spray painted all of the tapes that color specifically. So pink kind of really became the ethos when the gallery space opened.
Gotcha.
And then I started wearing pink, and like it became more a part of the branding after that. But I think we can attest it to that Cadillac pink color. And I don't know why she chose that, but it was just like a really great like bubblegum color. I thought it was bright. I really wanted to bring a different flavor to the space. And yeah, that's how the pink kind of came along, I think.
No, that's a great story.
It's kind of random.
It works.
Actually. Yeah, and I love like the culture that comes with like really just thinking about AM FM and like thinking about two sides of things. Like I was listening to AM FM radio. You have the talk radio and things like that. So that really represented the magazine side of things, where you're having more long-winded conversations, features, like written features on the articles on the website and things like that. And then the FM side was really like the more pop-in
Nightlight,
yeah.
stage before,
where you do the performances and stuff like that. So it was really this duality that was coming together within the space. And I think for me, being not into pink and like being queer and like reclaiming it in some way too, I was really into it. Yeah. So I just embraced it, honestly.
Where can people get in tune with what you're doing? Plug all the things.
Yeah, so we're on all the social medias. I don't do a lot of tweeting, but Instagram and Facebook.
You mean X?
Oh, X.
You don't X.
Yeah, we're AMFM Life, LIFE. So that's what we're on social media, and then our website is www.amfm.life also, because it's a lifestyle essentially. And yeah, we have features. I got a newsletter where I'm sending out Mxxd events and stuff. So if you want to be more in tune on that, if you want to see art that we're showcasing and featured artists that we're working with, and buy some art or something like that too, we got collectors lists and all kinds of things. But yeah, definitely tap into our newsletter also.
I'm your host, Nah. This is Ciera. And this is episode 5. Thank y'all for tuning in. You can catch us on socials at Positioning Your Passion everywhere. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.